What's up YouTube, Dell here from Zephyr, and because you guys liked the guide for the hand traps, you smashed that like button way above 50 likes in the first 24 hours, I thought I would bring you the breaker version. So what we're going to be talking through on this one is I'm going to take you through 13, technically 15 different breakers that will be good in the upcoming format and talk about the ones that are really being considered by a lot of competitive players, whether that's going to be in your side deck, maybe even in your main deck, depending on your particular build, to go from there. So short, sweet, simple, just like the last one, we're going to be going over the 8 decks that I feel are going to be quite effective for this current format, and then talk about some other effects that they may or may not have on different decks. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. Diving headfirst into the first breaker card. So the first breaker card we're going to be talking about is Dark Ruler No More. Now, this is a card that's kind of spiked back up in popularity just because of how good it is against the Yummy matchup. Now, the thing with Dark Ruler No More is that you guarantee your opponent is going to get another turn because you're not able to deal much damage, if any. But when you're looking at the current format and the way that the modern decks are able to play during your opponent's turn a lot more effectively, when you're looking at stuff like the K9s, the Yummies, the Dracotails, and then you merge into that as well alongside stuff like the Vanquish Souls, you're really going to be able to kind of mitigate exactly what your opponent has and ultimately end up breaking their entire field. The other downside that you need to keep in mind of is that when you're utilising Dark Ruler No More, yes, it only negates the monsters on the field, so you still need to deal with any particular cards in the opponent's hand, like the hand traps that we've already previously mentioned. So, Dark Ruler No More against a Yummy's end field. How effective is it? Well, big fat green tick. Being able to activate Dark Ruler No More, not only will it turn off Snatchy on the field to try and then work its way into the Synchro plays and everything else in between, but also turns off the Herald of the Arc Light, which a lot of people forget about its secondary effect, that any card sent from the hand or deck to the grave is banished instead, can be massively damaging in a Dracotail matchup. So there really needs to be ways to out that particular card, and we're going to be talking about other ways to do that as we go through this list. Moving on to the next one. So the next one, of course, is going to be the K9 variants. Now, the different variants will depend on how effective Dark Ruler No More is. So the most effective variant that Dark Ruler No More is going to be against will be the Kristrons, in my opinion, because with the Kristrons, they usually end in their field on sometimes an Infinity with an SP Little Knight, and if they do, you could even consider putting a Chimera Tech Fortress in your extra deck, Chimera Tech Dragon in your extra deck, because then you can contact fuse their Cyber Dragon Infinity with their SP Little Knight, and then straight away you're getting rid of 2 disruptions. But very rare that that might be the case, because the K9 strategy might start to change a little bit, so they're not just going to end their field like it. So when you're going to be utilising Dark Ruler No More, not only can you turn off SP, not only can you turn off the Cyber Dragon Infinity, you'll also turn off the Tristanos and a Ripper if they have put that on the field. When you're looking towards the Vanquish Soul lineup, that's not going to be that effective, because ultimately what they leave on their end field is probably going to be looking more like a Ripper plus a Rock. And when you're turning off both of those, they then still have the rest of the hand to play with. Yes, sometimes it could turn off some of the reveal effects on the field that they're going to try and do. They also have the trap card that they can chain, and then chain the monster effects on the field to get them the draw advantage if they want to, or they just tag them out for the cards in the hand and then continue to make their play. So against the Vanquish Soul lineup, probably not as effective. And then when you're looking at other K9 variants as well, the Dark Ruler No More will pretty much be targeting the Ripper to negate that, and even then they still have the ability of getting Lupus to the graveyard, bringing it back, and then working their plays further forward. So ultimately against the K9 matchups, it really comes down to the variant. Up against the Kristrons, absolutely amazing. Up against any other variant, not so good. Moving into the Dracotails. Now, the Dracotails themselves don't really end an insanely powerful end field like on presence. They have the trap card that could in theory negate the Dark Ruler No More if they're worried about it, but ultimately if you're going to use Dark Ruler No More against Dracotails, I'm personally not going to negate it unless my end field is full of more floodgate monsters, something like a Shaddoll Winder, and even then I feel that you'll be better off using an Imperm against the Winder to then try and play through everything else in between. So only with the Dracotails, no matter really what variant is being played, you're not going to want to be putting in Dark Ruler No More, and it's not going to be that effective for you in that matchup. Moving on to Malice. Ultimately with Malice, again, their end field sometimes can be quite strong, but their end field is probably going to be something like a Heart's Crypta, so you're just trading a 1-for-1 on that one. Maybe if they are still playing the Link 5 at Ignista, which Allied Code Talk are very rare, is that actually even happening now? Like, it's more common that they're going to be ended on a Heart's Crypta. They still have ways to be able to get it back off the field and then bring it back to the field, so you're not ultimately doing a lot with Dark Ruler No More. So I personally, again, wouldn't be putting it in directly against Malice. Up against the Mitsurugi Raizuls, I personally wouldn't want to be using it. It's one of the ones, if I'm main decking it, I know that I can use it because it could, in theory, turn off the detonator and you're only trading 1-for-1 in that scenario. But ultimately, again, it's one of the ones that I'm not going to be siding it in. It can be okay because you're trading directly for the detonator, but I feel that there are other options that you'll be trading off with that would be a lot better for you. Moving on to themes of variants. Again, themes of variants can be quite interesting. So in the Memento kind of variant of this one, you can turn off the combined creation, but then you need to deal with the key mace in the hand, and then you also will be turning off like the Caesar if they do make it, or even a Desiree. But then you're, again, quite like the Detonator, you're trading 1 for 1, you're not getting maximum value out of it, so it's probably not ultimately worth it as much as it possibly is. So there's a bit of a meh. If you are so worried about Caesar, I feel there are better options you could be putting in there. But if you only have the option to choose from, for example, like a Raigeki, Ultimate Slayer, or a Dark Ruler, and you feel that you're going to face more Yummy, so you're going to put in Dark Ruler, and that's the only card you have available to you in the side deck, you still might consider putting it on to trade with that Caesar. Moving into Blue Eyes, so Blue Eyes again is quite an interesting one. Ultimately, they can chain True Light and then chain their Spirit Dragon to tag it out to then get them negate back on the board. You haven't really done anything. You're not really, like, they could also activate the Primite Drill Beam to negate it as well. It's not that great of a trade-off. It doesn't really do enough against the Blue Eye strategy. So you have better, more effective options to kind of utilize, and ultimately, I just don't think it's that good. In the Lunar Light matchup, very quickly, it's not, there we go, it's not good at all. Like, the issue with Lunar Lights is once they get to their end field, and they get to their Towers monsters, there's very few cards that can actually get rid of them. Dark Rule No More is going to have no effect whatsoever, so you need cards that affect the player, not the monster, and that's how you're going to be able to get past it. But even then, when you're looking at cards like that, you're probably going to start considering stuff like Lava Golems, Rasphere most, depending on the particular deck you're playing, or of course, Kaijus in a more generic manner. Moving on to the next card. So the next card is Ultimate Slayer. I actually quite like Ultimate Slayer, this format. It does have its hits and its misses. There are some times where being able to send like a Synchro to then return a card from the deck, from the field to the extra deck, and then negate another card on the field can be really, really important. With a Fusion, you can spin back a Fusion monster and then destroy a card on the field. A Link, usually what you're going to be sending is the Tri-Brigade Link 5. That will then give you the ability to send Garura from your extra deck and you get a draw. And then you do have the XZs of the Agigator to then send, put an XZs back and then negate another monster on the field. So it's kind of risk and reward, but what you need to remember is that there are some times where you won't be able to get the maximum value from it. Now, what I mean by that is, as we talked about Yummy specifically, usually on a Yummy's end field, they're going to be going for Snatchy and they're going to be going for Herald of the Art Light. One of them is going to be a Link monster, one of them is going to be a Synchro. Now, your opponent cannot chain monster effects to the effects of Ultimate Slayer, so more times than not, unless they have a targeted negation, like a Primite Drill Beam that we'll talk about a little bit later on, ultimately, they're going to be able to you're going to resolve the first effect of the Ultimate Slayer. Now, in the Yummy matchup, personally, you have two options. You can either send the Malong from the extra deck, that will then target to put the Herald of the Art Light back into the extra deck to negate the Herald of the Art Light, and then you use the Malong, to return the Herald of the Art Light, and then you use the Malong to try and negate the Yummy Snatchy, which in turn your opponent would then chain the Yummy Snatchy effect and then go from there. Not negate, return it. So they then chain the Yummy Snatchy and it just synchros off anyway. The flip side to that as well is you can send the Tri-Brigade Link 5. In doing so, you'll put the Yummy Snatchy back from the field into the extra deck, which can be quite useful for you, unless they have Yummy Surprise, which more times than not they probably will do, or even if they have the Minion to summon another Yummy back to the field, they'll still have the Herald of the Art Light, because when you're using the Link 5, the Link 5 is ultimately just giving you a send of Garura to then draw you a card. So you're not really affecting anything, and if you're the Herald of the Art Light, you're not probably going to be using Herald of the Art Light to stop the Garura. So the best way to send would probably be the Synchro to then threaten the Snatchy and then force the Snatchy out. So ultimately, it's a bit of a meh card. It's still quite good because you're trading, in theory, a 1 for 2, which can be quite useful for you, but you're still then giving them access to their Synchro monster. Their Synchro monster, unless you have another effect to completely shut it off, is still going to be able to do something. It's one of them ones that, again, if you have the option of playing Dark Ruler No More or Ultimate Slayer, you're probably going to go for Dark Ruler No More. If you can choose to play both of them, then absolutely fine. You're going to side in Dark Ruler No More for the Yummy matchup, and then you'd side in Ultimate Slayer for something else. Moving on to the next one, so K9 variants. Against pure K9s, you very easily have a target in the form of Ripper. You get rid of the Ripper, put it back to the extra deck, and then you send the Agigator to allow you to negate another card. So very, very useful. When you're looking at the Vanquished Soul matchup, again, it'll be Ripper, and then you send one to negate a card on the field. More times than not, anything that you're trying to negate on the field might be something along the lines of like a Holly Sue or a Borga, and then that will ultimately just get chained. When you're looking at the Crystron version, the Crystron just have so much variety that there's not really a direct out. Yes, you can activate Ultimate Slayer, you could get the ability to try and put the Cyber Dragon Infinity back into the deck. That will then give the ability, so you're trading your Ultimate Slayer for the Cyber Dragon Infinity, you're then using the Agitator to try and negate an SP Little Knight or trying to negate the Tristanos. Tristanos will then of course chain its effect to then synchro off. So again, quite like the Yummy matchup, you're trading 1-for-1s in these particular scenarios, and you're better off with the Dark Royal No More in that scenario than you are with the Ultimate Slayer. So again, bit of a grey area. It's not bad by any means, but it's not a game ender. It's one of the ones that you need to kind of combo with other bits, and you're basically trading 1-for-1s or 1-for-2s, which is still very, very good. But if you're giving me the option of Dark Rule No More or Ultimate Slayer in those specific matchups, you're probably going to lean a little bit more to Dark Rule No More than you are the Ultimate Slayer. Going into the Draco Towers. Now again, quite like Dark Rule No More, this is a bit of an interesting one on this. And what I mean by that is when you're activating Ultimate Slayer, again, this one you'll be sending a fusion monster. The more commonly chosen option for the fusion monster will be the Garura, and what you're doing is you're then going to be putting back an Arthleon or a Glamel, which is a good little trade-off, back into the extra deck, so they lose that resource. Now, you're not able to chain monster effects to this, so they can't use Feymana to fuse. They do have the option, if they want to keep that fusion monster on the field, to use the Flame to negate the Ultimate Slayer and draw a card. And then they have the ability to go chain the trap card and then chain Feymana to use the fusion material on the field. So there are ways that they can play around it. You could send Elder Entity Ints, that would probably be the better option, because rather than that draw, you get that ability to then try and bait out another card. So you would then force the trap card a lot more, because you could go Ultimate Slayer, target an Arthleon, or of course Gamel. If they've ended on a Gamel, that's the one you want to go for. Unless you're in the mirror matchup and they go for the Secturion Dragon, then you want to get rid of the Secturion Dragon. That's when they would ultimately end up going, okay, they've sent Elder Entity Ints. The chances are the Unts on the next chain is going to target one of the spells or traps, or target another monster on the field to destroy it. That's when they're probably going to want to be trading the trap card with it for that particular moment. So it's a good option. It has its utilities. Right now, when you're trying to compare Dark Rule No More to it, this is one of the odd scenarios where you would much rather go for an Ultimate Slayer than a Dark Rule No More. Moving into Malice. Malice again is also quite an interesting one. It's nice to put their monster back into the extra deck, because being able to put a Heart Scriptor back into the extra deck means that you don't need to worry about it floating back from the graveyard. You don't need to worry about its quick effect to banish one of your cards. And if they are on the Allied Code Talker, again, you can trade that 1-for-1 option. You do need to remember that sometimes with the K9s, when you're looking at Ripper as well, that I've just remembered, the top of that is if they make it with the Lupius, Lupius can't be targeted. So the XZs can't be targeted. So you kind of need to keep that in mind of when you're looking at, which again, why it's a bit of a grey area, because in the pure, Ripper is going to be your general target, but then if they've got it protected from targeting, it's not going to do anything. Going back to the Malice, again, when you're sending your Link monster, the more common one is going to be the Link 5 Tri-Brigade. You can send Ferrojeet instead, and Ferrojeet will basically do the exact same thing. It lets you draw a card and then put a card back. Otherwise, you're sending the Link 5. The Link 5 will then send a Guru from the extra deck, and then you get to draw a card. So it's okay. Again, it's not an overall game ender, which is why it's a bit of a grey spot. It's going to be better than Dark Rule No More in this scenario, and you're trading the 1-for-1 and then getting a bit of a replacement by being able to draw a card, so it's not bad. And it just kind of comes down to the environment you're going to. Like, if you feel that you could go for 5 rounds of Swiss, and of those 5 rounds of Swiss, you're going to be playing 4 Yummies, 4 K9, like between 4 Yummies, 4 K9 Krystrons, and then maybe like 1 Malice and 1 Dracotail within those scenarios, you're probably going to lean more towards Dark Rule No More. If it's the other way around, you're going to face more Dracotowers and more Malice, you might consider something like an Ultimate Slayer rather than Dark Rule No More in your side deck, but then ultimately you kind of look more at the more effective hand trap stuff like Artifact Lancer. Moving into the Mitsurugi Raziel matchup, again, what you're going to be doing this one is you're just going to be trading for a detonator. You're going to be utilizing this, putting the detonator back to the extra deck, and then using Agitator to negate another card on the field. So it's very good, just a bit of a grey area. Like, you're trading 1-for-1s, it's not that bad. It's not an overall game ender. It's probably going to be more effective than a Dark Rule No More, because you can still attack, you can still have your battle phase and still do damage. And it's just one of them ones that you're still trading with the detonator, but you do need to still worry about the Murakumo coming back to then basically Raigeki the field. Moving on to the Fiendsmith. Fiendsmith, very straightforward on this one. You're either going to be trading with a Desiree, but again, if Desiree has the Link monsters attached to it, it can't be targeted. So then ultimately what you're going to end up doing is you're going to be trading with the Caesar, and you're basically going 1-for-1 with that one. The biggest benefit of trading with the Caesar is that you can trade with the Caesar, and then as long as you can target the Memento Combined Creation, you can technically negate that with the Agitator. So again, you're trading a 1-for-2, which is always going to be a bit more advantageous, because when you're able to trade one of your cards for 2 of your opponent's cards or 2 of your opponent's interactions, you're going to be in a much better position. It's still a grey area because, again, it's not a game ender. It's one of them ones that, again, you could consider putting in. And when you're seeing these two lines of comparison right here, as an overall balance, Ultimate Slayer is a little bit better than Dark Rule No More. But keep in mind, the Ultimate Slayer does adapt your extra deck. So with the Ultimate Slayer, you're going to need at least 1 Synchro, 1 Link, 1 Fusion, and 1 XZs in your extra deck. So it's going to be taking up 4 of your slots. And if your extra deck is already naturally quite tight, that will then dictate how effective you can utilize the Ultimate Slayer. Moving into Blue Eyes White Dragon. So Blue Eyes White Dragon is an interesting one because, again, you can activate Ultimate Slayer. You would target their Spirit Dragon, which is quite useful. But then they just chain the trap card. And again, in the previous example of Dark Rule No More, they then just go chain the Spirit Dragon and tag it out. So there are ways that they can dodge it. If they've already used True Light or they've already used a spell trap that can't negate it, that can't stop it, then you're in a bit of a better position. But the chances are for you to hold back Ultimate Slayer that much, the rest of the hand must just be free fodder that you don't mind getting interacted with or being negated or whatnot. And even then you need your opponent to take the bait. And if they don't take the bait, then you're not really getting anywhere. So it's a grey area. If you hold it to the right time, if you utilize it at the right time, you're going to get maximum advantage from it. But usually more times than not, a Blue Eyes player can navigate around it. And that's probably where you'd be looking at maybe opening up those slots for stuff like Lightning Storms and Harpy's Feather Dusters rather than an Ultimate Slayer. Again, Lunalights on this one, you'll see a common theme that Lunalights just aren't that affected by breakers because if they're able to go off and get into their Liger Dancer, it's near impossible to get rid of the Liger Dancer with breakers. It just doesn't happen. Like Forbidden Droplets, Dark Rule No More, it just has no effect on it whatsoever, so it's not really going to get any advantage. So now let's move on to Raigeki, a good old-fashioned classic field breaker. So the reason that Raigeki has kind of come back into the forefront is, again, it's a nice one of them ones that trades with particular elements on the field because not many decks right now on a consistent basis are ending on Omni Negates. Now, when we take the Yummy into example for this one, it can be very good if they have utilized Obedience School and not been able to get into the Herald of the Art Light, and they choose not to get into the Herald of Art Light as early as possible. Remember, once you get to the main phase, that is when you have turn player priority. So you get to activate the first card effect of the main phase if it is your turn. So if they want to try and go into the Herald of Art Light as early as they possibly can, what's going to happen here is you'll go, cool, main phase, activate Raigeki, then they need to chain an effect to try and get into Herald, and as the chain resolves, the Raigeki would wipe out the Herald. So they're not going to be able to get any advantage. The exact same thing could be said if they choose to chain the Snatchy Yummy to then synchro into a synchro monster. That monster then gets wiped off the field. So they'll lose all of that advantage that they've tried to build up. And what you're doing there is you're using Raigeki to trade with the field. It's also a nice way that if they already do have Herald of the Art Light, you're using Raigeki to trade with the Herald because they don't really want to lose their entire field. Unlike Lightning Storm, which can only destroy attack position monsters, Raigeki will clear all monsters on the field, so it will be a little bit more effective and a little bit harder for them to play around, and that's why more people than not will be putting Herald in defense, less so as well because his attack stats aren't exactly that great, but being able to use Raigeki gives them that option to, like, if you use Lightning Storm, you're just trading Lightning Storm for their Snatchy Yummy, and they go, okay, cool, chain Yummy, bring back a monster, synchro into defense, and then it plays around Lightning Storm. But Raigeki will just go, I don't mind if you're in attack or defense, I'm getting rid of it. So still a really kind of cool option. It's one of the ones that can trade bits for bits. It's not an absolute game ender, so again, which is why it's going to get a grey meh, which you'll see a lot of a bit common theme with these particular breakers that I've put together is that a lot of them have some good applications, but the decks that are ended on Omni Negates, like the Herald of the Art Light and the Subdragon Infinity, you're baiting that interaction out. Speaking of the Canines, so it will directly out the Ripper. It will out a Vanquish Soul Enfield as well, because again, the Vanquish Soul Enfield will have like a Ripper. It will then have like a Rock of the Vanquish. And then what they're trying to do there is they're then going to need to chain their trap card to make sure that their cards can't be destroyed by card effect. So again, you're baiting out that trap card early on. And the benefit of doing something like that is that trap card is also a field clear for them side. So them being able to activate that trap card once you start to present your own field can be very damaging because it will clear your entire field off. And then you're struggling to try and rebuild your field while your opponent still has a nearly indestructible field going up against them. So a Raigeki is a nice trade-off again for that one. So quite like when you're trying to trade it for the Herald in the previous example, you're trying to trade it for either Cyber Dragon Infinity or you're trying to trade it for the Vanquish Soul trap card. It's an okay trade. Again, it's another one of them ones where in those particular scenarios, you'll be better off with something like a Dark Rule No More than you will with a Raigeki. But if you're able to combo off a Dark Rule No More with a Raigeki, my days, that's pretty insane. So again, Canine variants, pretty meh. It's decent, it's not bad, but it gives you that kind of things to keep in mind. Going into the Dracotals, now the Dracotals, again, it's quite good to utilize our Raigeki against their field because If they are that threatened and want to keep the field around, they'll utilize the trap card. If they don't mind about their field being gone because they still have the Fame to fuse the monsters in their hand, that's when they might still choose to let the Raigeki go through. Another thing you need to remember is that if when they use the Fame to fuse from the hand, because they're going to be using 2 or more monsters are going to be sent to the graveyard, they can then revive the Glenel and the Arthleon that might be in that graveyard at that particular point. If they do choose to end on the Hieratic Seals, that's when you'll get a little bit more advantage off the back of it, because when you're trying to end on the Hieratic Seals and you Raigeki it, they could choose to chain the Hieratic Seals to return one of their cards from the field to the hand, and then as it resolves, they'll still get a dragon from the deck back to the field. So something like a Moolulu will then still enable them to fuse. So it's a grey meh. It can be quite effective. It can catch them off guard, but there are still those scenarios where it's not a game ender, and you may want to consider something else a little bit more effective for the Draco Tower matchup than a direct Raigeki. Moving into Malice. Malice, again, quite like Draco Towers, they don't put everything on the field. They have ways to revive from the graveyard, so you need to be comboing off a breaker with something else to stop them gaining back their resource. When they're able to activate stuff like GWC, when they're able to activate stuff like March Air, when they're able to activate other cards, maybe even a Bestial if they choose to go back down that route, they're going to get ways to regain their field presence that they've already just lost through a Raigeki, so you're not really trading a huge amount off, especially when those cards are coming back with their effects intact and not already being used that turn. It's one of the ones that you need to bait out their effects first and then clear them off, and they have to be hard once per turn effect. So again, bit of a grey area on this one. Yes, you can trade for a field, but they still have that ability to recur it all and go again. Moving into the Mitsurugi and Raizio one, I don't think Raigeki is that good because more times than not, the detonator can protect itself. On top of that as well, the Mitsurugis, they have the ability to come back from the graveyard. Like, they play Purification if they really want to protect their monster lineup. They have the ability of utilizing Prayers to bring the Murakumo back from the graveyard. Like, it's not an end-all be-all, and ultimately, I don't think it's worth putting Raigeki in. Again, it's one of the ones that if I have Raigeki in my side deck, I'm probably not considering putting it in. I feel that there are other cards I would want it to take the space of, something that's going to be a little bit more generic, something that's going to cover more matchups as well. Maybe something like a Droll and Lotbird, but again, you want to be looking at specific breakers. You might want to be looking at stuff like Ultimate Slayers, Ghost Spells, anything else like that. Moving into the Fiendsmith lineup, the Fiendsmith lineup on this one, again, you're trading it for the Caesar. You'll be going Raigeki, you'll trade it for the Caesar. Unlike the Detonator, it doesn't have its own inbuilt protection to say, cool, I can keep the Caesar around. You won't be trading off with the Desiree. The Desiree will pretty much ultimately negate it and doesn't want to be destroyed. You still then leave them with Paradise and everything else in between. It's not a game ender. You are just trading for the Caesar, so it's a one-for-one kind of meh option. If you've got it, it's one you could side in. If you're not playing it, it's not the end of the world. Blue Eyes White Dragon, again, it's a bit meh. It can be okay, but when they still have access to True Light, if they really want to protect their field, they are activating the Primite Drill Beam. Unless you're chaining this off with something like a Forbidden Droplet to send it and you're going to get the maximum advantage from everything, it's not a game ender. Loonlight's pretty straightforward on this one. As I mentioned already, like trying to break the Loonlight field with a Raigeki is just not going to work. You need stuff that is Kaijus, you need stuff that is going to get past unaffected monsters, so you're not going to get any advantage from this at all. Moving on to Harpy's Feather Duster. So Harpy's Feather Duster in the Yummy matchup, again, I think is actually pretty decent because what you're going to be doing here is you're going to get rid of the Field Spell. The Field Spell is actually a really, really important card for the Yummy strategy because that's what's going to give it all its attack stat buffs, and that's what's going to make their little weak, cute, cupsy monsters strong and threatening. So when you're able to do that, what you're going to be doing with a Harpy's Feather Duster is if they want to protect it, they'll trade it off with a Judgment, they will trade it off with a Herald of the Arc Light. So you're going to be trading these one-for-one scenarios again, pretty much the same with Lightning Storm, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the idea is you're doing this trade back and forth. If they really want to protect their field and they have a lot of back row set up ready to go and protect, more times than not, along that back row will be like a Solemn Judgment, a Solemn Warning, plus they got the Herald of Arc Light. So you're going to be trading for that one, and then you need to back it up with another card. So it's one of them ones that is part of a 2-card combo to get everything cleared off. So even then, it's a bit of a grey area that it's not the end of the world when they're trying to make their plays. Moving into the Canine variant. Now, actually, Harpy's Feather Duster is not that bad. So when you're looking at it in regards to the Vanquish Soul, you're trading the Harpy's Feather Duster for their Field Spell, and then you also trade it for their Trap card as well, the Dust Devil. We already know how powerful both of those cards are, so being able to trade with those is probably a lot more effective than being able to trade with our Raigeki, because the Raigeki can be chained to and they'll protect it, whereas with the Duster, yes, they can chain the cards, but they're still ultimately going to lose them. And again, quite like Raigeki, you're doing it at a point where you have nothing to lose. You're activating one card, you're trading it for one, if not two cards, and that's when you're going to get the most advantage from it. When you look at the Crystron version, it can be quite good at the Crystron version, depending on what else they have along their spells and trap zones. Usually going to be looking at stuff like Incursion and Cluster. If they want to protect the Incursion or the Cluster, they then have the ability to utilize the Infinity. So you're trading a Harpy's Feather Duster for an Infinity Omni Negate, and you're going for these 1-for-1 trade-offs, which wouldn't be the end of the world, and it kind of lets you understand how much they value their spells and traps. But more times than not, if they value their spells and traps at that high of a level that they want to protect it by utilizing one of their monster effects, they then don't feel, or they feel that their spells and traps are going to be more effective at stopping you trying to break their field than anything else. So it's a bit of a meh option. It's quite good. It's still one of these cards that is currently limited at 1. So if you're playing Triple Tactics Frost or you want to go the luck of the draw, you might as well play it. It's not going to be taking up 3 slots in your side deck. And if you have that one last slot, you're like, what could this card be? Playing Duster is not that bad of an option. It'll still be quite useful. Against the Dracotale lineup, the big thing about the Dracotale lineup on this one, unlike Raigeki, is even though Raigeki will still trade for the trap card, Raigeki might be one of the ones where your opponent just goes, yeah, cool, I'll let that resolve, and then you don't really mind it. Whereas with Harpy's Feather Duster, when you're activating that against a Dracotale matchup, what you're trying to get rid of is you're trying to get rid of both their trap cards. Now, the very important thing to remember about the trap cards is not only will they be a spell negate and a technical compulsion and a tap position monster, but they also let your opponent draw 1 and then ultimately 2 cards, which is really, really important. So when you're activating your Harpy's Feather Duster and they go, cool, well, I guess I negate it with the trap card anyway that negates the spells, the flame, to draw a card, you go, okay, cool. That's what's going to happen more times than not. If you do successfully resolve it, you'll get rid of both the trap cards, but straight away what you're doing there is you're going Harpy's Feather Duster, trading for a trap and a draw. So you're really being able to try and clear some space off, and it can be quite good. It's not a game ender, it's not a green tick, it's a grey meh, because it still puts in a bit of use for you, but it's not going to change the scope of the game. You are basically just trading 1-for-1 with that trap card. Against Malice, honestly, I don't think it's worth it. Like, you would then need to combo this off. You would need to go with, okay, cool, activate Harpy's Feather Duster. They'll go, okay, cool, chain my trap cards, and then you'll need to go Raigeki, and even then you still need to worry about March here. So there are ways that they can still play, there are ways that they can still present their field. It's not a game ender, and when you need to combo off like a Harpy's Feather Duster with a Lightning Storm, or Harpy's Feather Duster with a Raigeki, it's not a game ender, and it probably really isn't that worth it. For the Mitsurugi Raizel matchup, I actually feel that this is a little bit better than a Raigeki for the pure fact that when you're activating this card, you're baiting out the Purification, you're baiting out the Prayers, you're also baiting out the Cross. Like, there's so many different, like, there's more cards that you can bait out with the Harpy's Feather Duster than you can with Raigeki in this particular scenario, which is why that's probably something that I would look at. Again, if you're like, you have one slot to put in your extra deck, or in your side deck, and one slot that you can side in, do you go for Harpy's Feather Duster or Raigeki in the Mitsurugi Raizel matchup? I'm probably going to go for Duster rather than Raigeki. So overall, bit of a meh option. When we're looking at the Fiendsmith lineup, now the Fiendsmith lineup is very, very interesting on this one because Caesar can't stop it. And the one big benefit of this one is it will clear off all of the equips to the Desiree. More times than not, if they have that Desiree set up, they're probably going to negate it and stop it because they kind of want the Desiree there. But you're trading the Harpy's Feather Duster for a Desiree spell up to like X amount of card negates. So it's a good little bit of a trade-off in that one, and it's a little bit better because you're not targeting the Desiree, you're actually trying to get rid of their spells and traps. So again, it's a bit of a meh option. It doesn't out the Caesar. It's another one of the ones that needs to be traded like 1-for-1. It needs to be with 2 particular cards. And if you're going to be looking to trade 2 cards for 1, you're probably better off with Dark Rule No More to turn off the Desiree and the Caesar than you are trying to go for anything else. It can be quite good in the Memento matchup because it will bait out the Memento Fusion if they have that set along their spell and trap zones. It will also then attempt to bait out the field spell and try and get rid of that particular backup that they might have, but then you still need to deal with the monsters, and that's when you need to become a 2-card combo than a 1-card combo. Up against Blue Eyes, I actually think it's really quite good against Blue Eyes because what happens here is you'll activate your Harpy's Feather Duster, it will clear off their field spell, which is something that they kind of want to keep in rotation because if they're trying to rebuild their field after it's already been cleared, they need that field spell to give them that additional normal summon and the ability to send another Blue Eyes from the deck to the grave. The downside is what they have the option for is they do have the Drill Beam to negate it if they really do want to. They also have the option if they are fearful of a Harpy's Feather Duster during the draw phase or even the standby phase, they can use their Spirit Dragon to tag it out into the Ultimate Spirit Dragon, and then the Ultimate Spirit Dragon gives them the ability to negate the Harpy's Feather Duster. And ultimately what you're trying to do with the Harpy's Feather Duster is you're trying to destroy their True Light, because when that gets destroyed, it will then destroy all of your opponent's monsters, so it kind of clears them off. So it's a bit of a grey area. It's probably closer to a green tick than it is for the rest of these decks on this list, but the idea is that I still feel that they have ways to play around it, and again, a good, cautious Blue Eyes player will be able to navigate around it so that it's not as devastating as it was previously. Moonlights, again, they don't care. Like, okay, they have a Liger Dancer on the field, you activate Harpy's Feather Duster, they're like, okay, cool, so you get rid of my Scales. If you get rid of Tiger, Tiger's just going to be able to float back a card. They then lose their Tenki. They're not really setting loads of spells and traps, because again, there's not really spells and traps that they could activate. Apart from being able to activate something like a Rivalry or a Gozen, which means you can't Kaiju them unless you're playing a Dark Beast. So they'll probably be better off with going for the Rivalry than a Gozen, because then they'll just go called Dark Kaiju. But ultimately, in that scenario, it's very, very rare that you're going to be able to see those trap cards, so I wouldn't be putting in Duster against them. We're going to blitz through the Lightning Storm, because Lightning Storm is pretty much a predecessor of Raigeki and Harpy's Feather Duster, so it serves the exact same purpose. It will be good to try and bait out spells and traps, but if they really want to protect it, they use Herald of the Arclight, and you're trading Herald of the Arclight for a Lightning Storm. The exact same in the K9, Crystron, Vanquish Soul version as well. If they want to protect from it, they will. If they don't protect from it, then there's a reason they're not protecting from it, and they're just going to let it happen. Exact same for the Draco Tales. If they want to negate it, if they want to play around it, they can put all their monsters into defense, and then what you're doing is you're basically using Lightning Storm as another Harpy's Feather Duster. Malice, again, they just have ways to recur their own field presence, so it's not a game ender. With the Mitsurugi, again, it gives you that benefit of if you want more Harpy's Feather Dusters, that's basically what you're going to be utilizing Lightning Storm for, is your Lightning Storm is just going to be more effective as being 2 Lightning Storm and a Harpy's Feather Duster equals 3 Harpy's Feather Dusters, and 1 Harpy's Feather Duster and 2 Raigekis in 3 cards rather than in 4 cards. So again, you'll be trying to trade in this scenario. You get that option to go, right, well, they don't put a Desiree on the field, I want to trade with their Caesar. They put a Desiree on the field, I want to trade with their spells and traps. Blue Eyes, again, you're always going to be targeting the True Light. Blue Eyes could be a little bit more defensive than everything else, because their monsters are just generally a little bit more stronger in defense when you're looking at their extra deck monsters. So they'll be playing around defense anyway. And then in the Lunar Light scenario, they just don't care again. They're like, what are you going to do? Lightning Storm my monsters? Okay, well, my biggest monster, strongest monster is unaffected. What are you going to do? Right, like, Lightning Storm my spells and traps? Okay, there's not really anything along there that I need to protect with. So moving on to the next batch. Now, the next batch is going to be a little bit more effective on this one. So the next batch, of course, is going to be Forbidden Droplet, Book of Eclipse, Super Polymerization, Metaltronis, and Evenly Matched. So let's have a look at Forbidden Droplet. So with Forbidden Droplet on this one, the big benefit in comparison to Forbidden Droplet to Dark Rule No More is it lets you halve their attacks. It lets you also still do damage that turn. It lets you be a little bit more aggressive. It's not a turn skip or a turn pass to let your opponent have another turn. The biggest downside in the Yummy matchup is you have to be very, very careful, because if they have Herald of the Arclight on the field, you cannot send cards from your hand to the graveyard with Droplet because it sends as cost. So you need to get the cards to the field first. The big benefit of something like that is that you should be able to put cards on your field without activating any effects. The other additional benefit of something like Forbidden Droplet is if you do have the ability to send a monster, spell, and a trap card, it means your opponent cannot chain a Yummy Surprise. They can't chain a trap card like Judgment to it. They can't stop it. The biggest downside is to do that, you need to send 3 cards. And usually you're going to want to send a monster so that they can't use Snatchy and they can't use Herald of the Arclight. You're going to want to definitely possibly be sending a spell. Like, I suppose maybe spell is the least effective one. They'll still just be able to chain Snatchy, Surprise, and then bring a card back. And then you also have the ability to send a trap card. So if your opponent sets like 4 in a Yummy matchup, you probably want to send a trap card because one of them could very easily be a Judgment. If they don't set 4, one of them's probably going to be a Surprise, and you go, okay, cool, well, send a monster and a spell. The other benefit of something like your Forbidden Droplet is it can be utilized later on in the turn. Like with Dark Rule No More, you probably want to use it at the start of the main phase to kind of shut everything off, unless your opponent is going to be bringing cards back from the graveyard. So with Forbidden Droplet, the other benefit is when you're able to put your cards on the field and your opponent tries to interact with them, you can target dodge by being able to activate Droplet and send them as cost, which can be quite useful when they're trying to utilize their Synchro monsters, even though they go back to the extra deck as cost. When they're using their Synchro monsters to try and negate or to try and flip your cards face down, you go Forbidden Droplet. Yes, you won't be able to negate the Synchro monster, but you'll then be able to chain and respond and get rid of their Snatchy, get rid of the Herald, and move on from there. So it's actually a lot better. I feel that it's on the same par as Dark Rule No More. I feel that if you have the resource to send and you don't mind putting your resources to the graveyard, like if you already open up like well, you can't really get rid of the Lupias, but if you open up cards you want in the graveyard, so like in a K9 Crystron version, for example, if you want your Cluster in the graveyard and you want your Incursion in the graveyard, you can do that. And if you want to normal summon your monster and you want that monster into the graveyard, like a Smygar, you're in happy days. You're in like dreamland because all 3 of those cards you want in the graveyard and you get rid of your opponent's monsters, like being able to be effective, and then you make them even weaker. In the K9 strategy, again, it's actually really, really good. Quite like Dark Rule No More, you're trying to trade with like your opponent's Tristanos, you're trying to trade with your opponent's Soul Dragon Infinity. The one big difference with the Crystron version is you do need to be very, very careful because more times than not, they're probably going to be guaranteed a trap card more than the Yummy ones, because the Yummies don't directly search out a trap card in the current game. Like, yes, of course, they do have Yummy trap cards that they could search, but they're not really going to be going out of their way to do that. Whereas with the Canines, they're going to naturally, the Crystons, they're going to naturally be trying to get to cluster. So they do have that option to chain the cluster and then still be able to chain some of the effects like Tristanos to tag out and everything else in between. It's still a good trade-off. Again, it lets you deal with Ripper because it's non-target. It lets you deal with Holly Sue. It will let you deal with... You can technically negate the field and then not allow them to chain the Dust Devil, but more times than not, after resolution, they just use the Dust Devil anyway. So I still think it's a green tick. I still think it could be very useful for you. It's also one of the ones that if you're going first and your opponent tries to Lupus and then Xyz during your turn, you can use your Droplet to negate it rather than a Dark Rule No More, because, like, unless they're going to go, cool, go back to an open game state and you go Dark Rule No More, you're probably going to be better off with Forbidden Droplet. The other benefit as well is that Forbidden Droplet can be set and then utilised during the next turn, whereas Dark Rule No More can't really do that. Against the Dracotals, I actually think that Forbidden Drop is a little bit better than Dark Rule No More, for again, the pure fact that if you send a trap card, it means they can't respond with their trap card, which only guarantees you on negate. But in that particular scenario, when they've already got a trap card set and you're trying to utilize it, you're probably not really wanting to negate something that is on that field. Like, Glamel is the best thing you can negate, and again, unless you're in the mirror match and they've got a Secturion Dragon on the field. The other flip side to that as well, which can be quite good, is you're able to utilize Forbidden Droplet to turn off the Arthleon. And Arthleon, quite like the Imperm and Veiler scenario, they're able to chain block it very easily. So you still need ways that will get past that chain block to still negate the Arthleon. And at those particular points, what you're usually doing is cutting off their access to additional resource with 1 or 2 with the Arthleon play. So I actually think it's a very good option. I think it's definitely an upgrade to Dark Rule No More and a little bit more effective for you in that scenario. And it's going to come down to the deck you're playing. If the deck you're playing actually doesn't mind about burning through their resource, so maybe stuff like the Canines or the Yummy, you're in a better position than your Dracotals when you actually want to. It's all about maintaining your resource. So unless you're putting the trap cards in the graveyard, or unless you're putting cards in the graveyard you've got doubles of, like 2 Rahus or 2 Ketus, you're not really going to get the most advantage from it. Moving into the Malice, now this is again a little bit more beneficial against Malice, and the reason it is a little bit more beneficial against Malice is that you have that option to activate it to stop your opponent being able to chain their trap cards, but more times than not, the big benefit of this one is being able to set it for going first, and then be able to trade off with your opponent's Dormouse. Yes, there are pros and cons to this, because if they have an extender, they're able to keep playing their routes. But if you have a way to go, for example, negate the Dormouse and then activate a card that returns the Dormouse back to the hand, that's when you're going to get a little bit more advantage from it as well. So overall, it's a great meh. Like, it's not as effective in like a guaranteed, like not even a turn ender, but like a guaranteed stop of resource. Because if they open up that March Air, if they open up ways to extend, they'll still be able to play. And that's where it gets a little bit more complicated, but it's still a very, very good option. Moving on to the Mitsurugi and the Raizios. Again, with this one, you're definitely going to be trading with a detonator. That's quite easy to do. You can also trade it with the Murakumo. Now, the only issue with the Murakumo is you're only going to be trading for it once, whereas the Murakumo can Raigeki as many times as it comes back to the field. You do have that option that if you're able to chain a particular type of card and they want to try and chain another effect to it, you can use Droplet again, send a spell, send a trap, send a monster, negate, and then they can't respond with anything, which can be very, very important, which gives you a little bit more of an edge. But again, the fact that they can just bring back the Murakumo whenever they kind of want to within reason is going to be very useful for them. And more times than not, you're going to need to want to send a trap and a monster to be able to negate a detonator. And the one big thing to remember about Droplet is it needs to negate the exact amount that it sends. So if they only have a Murakumo and a detonator on the field, and you choose to use Droplet and send a trap so that they can't use Purification, and then send a monster so they can't use detonator, and they have prayers, they could very easily chain the prayers to tribute off the Murakumo. Now they only have 1 monster left on the field, Droplet doesn't resolve, and their detonator is still live, and you've basically lost 2 cards for pretty much nothing. So it's a bit of a grey area. You're just trying to trade with the detonator at the very least. But only they can play around it and navigate it. Moving into the Fiendsmith, again, going first with the Fiendsmith, it can be quite useful because if you're able to activate this, you can pretty much turn off the Lacrima. You can't really, like, you could technically turn off the Requiem, like get them stuck with the Requiem on the field, because what you can do is you can go, they summon the Requiem, and you go on summon, chain the Droplet, send in a monster to negate the Requiem so it can't tag out. But more times than not, you're probably going to save it for the Lacrima, so the Lacrima can't send from the deck to the grave, or you're going to trade it off with the Caesar, you're going to trade it off with the Detonator, the Desiree, because it doesn't target. So it can be quite good, it can be quite effective. It has a little bit more effectiveness than against the Malice and the Mitsurugi Raiziel. Moving into Blue Eyes is kind of okay, like, it gives you a bit more of a benefit like Dark Rule No More, that again, if you send a trap card, they can't chain, but in a scenario, again, to be able to play around a Primite Drill Beam, a Blue-Eyed Spirit Dragon, and being able to play around a True Light, you need to be able to send a trap, a spell, and a monster. I would probably advise it if you're up against Blue Eyes, you let them have their monster. And what I'd say by that is you would send a spell, you would send a trap card so they can't use True Light to kind of then react. And then they can't use the Drill Beam. At the very least, I'd send a spell so they just can't use Drill Beam. And then worst case scenario, they go, okay, cool, tag out the Spirit Dragon. You go, okay, cool, resolve the Spirit Dragon, bring out the Ultimate Dragon. And then as you resolve Droplet, because you're only allowed to negate one card, you negate the Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon that they've just brought out. And you've kind of traded it out and baited out that Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon. So it's a grey area. It has its moments. It's not a game ender, but it does really do help you. Lunalights, again, it's just not really worth it as a breaker. Not that great. If you set it, you're only really going to be trading like 1 for 1. And even then, some of the Lunalight monsters don't really care because the amount of times they'll keep spinning through, you need to know the exact choke point of when you hit 1 or 2 cards. And because they keep having polymerizations and everything else in between and sending for cost, they just play around Droplet very easily. Moving on to the next one. So the next one is going to be Book of Eclipse. Now, Book of Eclipse, I think, is one of the best breakers for this particular format. The reason for that is that being able to utilize a Book of Eclipse, yes, the downside is your opponent can respond with Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs, which can make it quite difficult to play around with. But when you already have cards that people want to use their Ash Blossoms on, they want to use Ash Blossoms on Rahu Dragontail, they want to use it on the Mold Chummies. Like, unless they open up multiple Ash Blossoms, which is not going to be a benefit for them, like a mass benefit for them anyway, they need to then use an Ash Blossom during their turn and an Ash Blossom during your turn. Another big benefit of Book of Eclipse is it can be set going first, so it has a bit more of a balance being that quick play card. It can be quite useful, as you'll see a little bit later on, by being able to go first and then flip your opponent's normal summon face down. It means they can't then link it off or go any further, which does make it a little bit awkward. So in the Yummy matchup, I think it's really, really good because what you're doing here is when you're activating Book of Eclipse, not only can you do it during the draw phase, as it is a quick play, but it also gives you that ability to play around Snatchy and play around Herald of the Arc Light, because what you'll do here is your Book of Eclipse will flip the Herald of the Arc Light face down. Another big benefit is if you save it for the main phase and you activate it during the main phase, yes, your opponent can chain the Snatchy, but if they do that, whatever monster they bring back is going to get flipped face down. It also gives you that benefit that when they activate the Snatchy to bring a monster back to the field to then synchro, and you chain Book of Eclipse, the Book of Eclipse will put the Herald of the Arc Light face down, but the monster they bring back will not be flipped face down. So you do need to be very, very careful on this one. It's one of the ones that you need to activate it, and no matter what happens when the Snatchy tries to resolve, it gets flipped face down, and then it's not going to be able to interact with you as much. So really, really good card. As long as you time it correctly and your opponent doesn't have an Ash Blossom, you're in a very good position. Moving into the Canines, I think it's actually really quite good because you do get a bit of a trade-off if they try to use Lupus during your turn, because you would have already had a field presence. And if you're going to go activate Book of Eclipse, you're going to put your cards face down. You're also then going to put a Lupus and you're going to put an Azuna face down. So if you don't clear those cards off, your opponent's going to flip them up and they're going to draw 2 cards and then they can still activate the Lupus to XZ. So it's not a game ender in that scenario. As a breaker, it still can be very, very good. So in the Crystron matchup, you're probably going to be trading a Book of Eclipse for an Infinity, so that's something you do need to be a bit worried about. But in a Vanquish Soul version, being able to flip their monsters face down means that they won't gain all of the additional protection from a Dust Devil. It's one of the ones that you can then start to pick them off piece by piece. It also means that if your opponent was to use any of the tag out effects, they can't do because they're face down. And even if they were to chain a tag out effect, that monster will then hit the field and get flipped face down by the Book of Eclipse. So it's actually a really, really good breaker in that scenario and can be very, very useful, which is why it's an overall green tick. And it doesn't target, so it allows you to out the Ripper as well. Moving into the Dracotales. Honestly, I don't think it's that good against Dracotales because you confuse with face down monsters. So you put their cards face down, the only thing you're really going to stop them doing is going to be able to link off into the Hieratic Seals, and even then they need a very specific line of, like a route of play to get to the Hieratic Seals. Yes, it's still useful, yes, it's still good, but as a breaker, they probably already get to the Hieratic Seal. So if you're setting this card and then trying to use it during their turn, that's all you're shutting off. If you're trying to use it as a breaker, you're just putting their cards face down and you're like, okay, cool, well, I'll just use them as fusion material. So the only thing you're doing is trading off with the Glamel, and if they have enough cards to bait out to bring the Glamel back from the graveyard, then the Glamel is just active again. Or if they fuse into a Glamel and then able to chain the effects, Glamel is just active. So the only real benefit of something like a Book of Eclipse is if they're on the Winder play or if they're on the Secturion play in the mirror matchup, you flip them face down, you're able to still make a play. In the Malice matchup, it's kind of okay. And what I mean by that is, as a breaker, it's terrible. You're not going to be breaking a field with it at all because they're all link monsters. As a starter card, it's not so bad because, now, again, it's one of the ones that I'm not saying you would specifically put in, but it's one of the ones that if I look at my extra deck, I'm like, I've got Artifact Lancer, that's definitely going in, but I want another card that I could use going first. What else could I use? Droplet? Nah, not really worth it because it still leaves him with the monster on the field. Book of Eclipse could be a really good option, because what happens is they go normal summon Dormouse, you'll go Book of Eclipse, flipping it face down. They don't have the ability to link it off and get it into the graveyard, so they can't banish it with White Hair. They don't have the ability to extend because they don't control a link monster with the backup at Agnista, so it does make it very, very awkward for them to continue with that, and it can actually be a very powerful ender for that particular scenario. Into the Mitsurugi matchup, Mitsurugi Raizio. I'm going to put this as a bit of a mid option on this one. Again, you're going to be trading off with the Detonator. Non-target, non-destruction can be really important, flipping it face down. The only downside is putting the Murakumo face down. What you need to remember with a lot of tribute effects is if it tributes for the cost, it checks what that card is in the graveyard. So even if a card says tribute a reptile monster, unless it says tribute a face-up reptile monster, if it says tribute a reptile monster, you tribute the monster as cost, and then it checks that it's a reptile monster in the graveyard. So they can kind of get past the Book of Eclipse effect of it. As a starter card, it can be kind of useful to stop Detonator being built, but you need to be in a bit of a weird position because they need to put 3 Raizio monsters on the field, and you go, okay, cool, Book of Eclipse, flip them all face down. So the biggest downside is, again, you're going to give your opponent advantage during the end phase. They're going to go, cool, flip, 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 draw, draw, draw. But if you are comboing this off with Draw and Lockbird, which is an insanely powerful combo, by the way, you go, cool, if they've already drawn, you use Book of Eclipse, flip everything face down. They've already searched the card, you go Draw and Lockbird. Or they already searched the card, you go Draw and Lockbird, and then they go, okay, cool, well, I'll go summon, summon, summon. And the next play is going to be a Detonator. You can go, right, after the resolution of the summon, activate Book of Eclipse, flip them all face down. They'll all flip out, and it's like you're under draw, so you're not going to get draw on the Book of Eclipse. Into the Fiendsmith lineup. The Fiendsmith lineup can be quite good, because what you're going to be doing here is if you Book of Eclipse when they get a Engraver back to the field and a Lacrima, it's kind of like that nib check option where you're going to be putting these monsters face down, which means they don't have the Engraver to loot the resource back from the grave. It means they haven't got the Lacrima back to resource from the graveyard. They can't go into a Caesar. They can't go into a Desiree. When you're looking at the Mementos confused with their face down, so that's not going to be as much of a game ender. But when you're activating a Book of Eclipse against their already end field, putting a Combined Creation face down, then being able to put down a Caesar face down, even a Desiree face down because it's non-target, you do have that option. Like if you combo this off with a Dark Rule No More, you're in Dreamland. So I actually think it's really, really good in comparison to the way that it can be utilized going first and going second. So it's a good option to consider. Against Blue Eyes, I actually think it's a really good option against Blue Eyes because unlike targeted effects, what you're going to get with this one is the only thing that can really out it is if they choose to activate the Drill Beam, and then what you're doing is you're trading your Book of Eclipse for a Drill Beam, which isn't that bad of a trade-off. If it does resolve, no matter if they use their Spirit Dragon to tag out, the Spirit Dragon's going to be bringing out the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, and that's going to be going face down. It's non-target on any of their Blue Eyes monsters, so they can't protect it with their Neo Blue Eyes in the graveyard. It's also quite good for going first as well, because you set the Book of Eclipse, they normal summon the Sage of Visor Blue, you can then use Book of Eclipse to flip it face down. Now, the benefit of something like this is it means you're cutting off access to their additional normal summon, so they need to be able to then go into the Maiden. They would need to use Maiden's effect to discard it, to then get them the True Light. They would need to activate True Light to get them Wishes, use Wishes to get them Roar of the Blue-Eyed Dragon, activate Roar of the Blue-Eyed Dragon to summon the Blue Eyes from the deck directly, brings the Maiden back from the graveyard, and then they'll need to continue to play from there. So it makes it a little bit awkward, because what you're doing is you're shutting them off access to their additional normal summon, you're shutting off access to extended resources, and if you're able to ultimately, when they go Blue Eyes Wishes, combo off Book of Eclipse with an Ash Blossom, it really will cause them a lot of problems. So Blue Eyes, I think, is actually a pretty decent card. Again, what will make Book of Eclipse better than some other cards is the fact that how good it can be going first and how good it can be going second. Moving into Light Swans, moving into Lunar Lights, again, as a breaker, they don't care. You're not putting their Liger Dancer face down. They're a fusion-based deck. They don't care if you put their monsters face down. They're not really doing anything. Like, yes, you'll stop them going into a Cross Sheet, but you put them or an Xyz in the form of the Baguska. But ultimately, if they get to the Liger Dancer, it's game over. Like, it's very, very tricky. Unless you're comboing off your Book of Eclipse with a Kaiju or with a way to tribute their monsters off, you're not going to get the maximum advantage from it. Moving into my personal favourite breaker of this entire kind of format right now, but this will really come down to what deck you're playing, because again, quite like Ultimate Slayer, with Super Poly, you probably wanted to take up like 1, 2, maybe even 3 slots in your extra deck, depending on what you're expecting to face. What I do like in comparison is it is a spell speed 4. So unlike Droplet, where I need to send a trap card so that my opponent can't respond with a Judgment, I just activate Super Poly and discard a card, and they can't respond with anything. So the benefit of something like that against Yummy is you're able to activate Super Poly, you're able to fuse off their Herald of the Art Light, and you're able to fuse off their Snatchy, because they're both light monsters, and go into a Mud Dragon. So you've traded off their Snatchy, you've traded off their Herald of the Arc Light, and you've got yourself a monster that can then change, utilize its effect, so your opponent cannot target particular attributes you play. So if you're only playing Darks, you chain the effect of your Mud Dragon and call Dark. It then means that when your opponent is trying to synchro summon and trying to book a moon your cards, you're like, yeah, no, you can't target any of my cards. The only downside is if they have Surprise, they'll activate Surprise to bring back the Snatchy, and then they can start using Snatchy's effects. Which is a little bit different on that one, because obviously you can go to the battle phase with Snatchy, and then Snatchy can use its effect in battle phase. So it's not like a game ender. But again, if you combo that off with something like a Ghost Spell, it's insane, because you've got a monster on your field, you've got a monster that can protect you from targeted effects, and then you're also saying, well, I'm going to stop that. It pretty much ends the yummy turn. So I really like Super Poly. I think it's a great card. The discard is the biggest down point of it, but if it didn't have a discard and it was just like Poly using 2 cards on the field, it would be absolutely broken. Against the Canine variants, again, what I really like about this is if you have the right fusion monster to go into, this is where it gets a little bit awkward for the Vanquish Soul lineup, and it gets a little bit awkward for the Christian lineup, because they play with so many different attributes and different types. It does make it a little bit tricky to get exactly what you need to, but remember with the Christians, they're all going to be waters, and they're all going to be like aquas or machines, sorry. So that gives you the option to go into your Mud Dragon. What we don't have right now, which I really hope we get in the future, is we need a monster that is different attributes but same type. Right now we have same attribute, same type, different name in Mud Dragon, in Garura, and then we have same attribute, different types for Mud Dragon. So maybe in the future we'll get it the other way around, but there are kind of cards that in certain fusion decks, like the deck you're probably going to be utilizing Super Poly in more times than not will be the Dracotals, is that they can actually utilize the Chorozo. The Chorozo requires a Spellcaster and then a Fusion, Synchro, XYZ, or Link. So that lets you out some of those more generic cards when you're trying to build up a field. That being said, when you're looking at Lupus and Izuna, then they are 2 cards that you can utilize with Super Poly, and that clears them off. And again, because they can't change the Lupus, and Lupus will then get banished once it leaves the field, you're actually taking away their resource to get into Ripper. If they do get into Ripper, it does get a little bit more awkward, because Ripper being a wind does make it a little bit trickier to kind of clear off. That being said, Vanquish Souls, again, a little bit awkward to try and deal with, but if they do get a little bit lapsical and they put 2 monsters on the field, like a Jiaolong and a Raisin, you get to clear those off very easily. So there are ways where it works out really, really nicely. Again, quite like Book of Eclipse, because it's a quick play. It can be set for going first. It can be really good for going second. And the spell speed forward just makes it nearly impossible to try and deal with or navigate around. Unless you are expecting it, where you might want to dictate and adapt your end field a little bit more, it's still very difficult. Like, if my opponent is trying to play around Super Poly as a yummy player, and they're putting down, they choose not to put down a Snatchy, or they choose not to put down a Herald, I'm happy with that. And the biggest benefit of something like Super Poly is if you're able to dictate what you play, if you can use Super Poly as a way to go into the battle phase and extend your plays to get them even stronger, if you're able to utilize it by normal summon one of your monsters, they try to chain an effect that targets to negate it, and you go, cool, chain Super Poly, fuse off with that, and then one of your monsters, you're just going to get maximum amount of advantage, and that's when we move into the Dracotals. So when you're looking at Dracotals, the best thing about this one is you can use Super Poly to utilize one of their dragons, one of their spellcasters, and go into their biggest floodgate fusion monster in the form of the Sectron Dragon. Sectron Dragon is just absolutely insane in this matchup, because being able to say to them you can't activate dragons or spellcasters is pretty much what the deck wants to do. The exact same can be said for Blue Eyes a little bit later on. When you're able to use 2 of your opponent's monsters to make a fusion monster that's going to be strong and effective for you, that's when you're really going to reap in the rewards of this one. Moving on to Malice, I think it's actually quite good against Malice. Again, it's not a game ender, because what you're doing, like, it's not their end field presence that is the issue with Malice. It's the fact that they can come back from the graveyard, come back from the banishment, and you're putting them in the graveyard where they don't mind them being. The biggest benefit of something like this is if they're trying to build, if they're trying to go, cool, go Dormouse link into, Dormouse banish White Rabbit comes back to the field, link off into Lingaribo, you go, cool, chain Super Poly, 2 Darks, 2 Cyverse, give me a Garura. Then you're really starting to cause them a few issues, and that's where it makes it a little bit more awkward. So it's actually really good against Malice in that scenario. I still feel that it has great utility being able to break a field, because at the end of the day, if they're going to put on like a Red Ransom and a Heart's Crypta, you go, okay, cool, Super Poly, get rid of both of those. You've got rid of a particular position, and you've got yourself a monster that if it does leave the field, you're probably going to be able to get a nice little draw from it, and that's when you can control that, because if you're utilizing this in a fusion-based deck, you'll probably have more ways to fuse, and then getting it off the field, you're going to be able to gain a bit more resource, so you're basically re-looping back the card you discarded. Moving into the Raizel Mitsurugi. Now this one's actually a little bit awkward, which is why I'm giving it a bit of a grey area. And the reason it's awkward is that there isn't really a Super Poly target that utilizes Murakumo and Detonator. So trying to get rid of both of them is actually quite awkward. You can get rid of one of them, but that will then dictate what you put on the field. Like if you put a Dark Monster on the field, you could get rid of the Murakumo, but then they just go, okay, cool, well, activate a card that brings the Murakumo back and then Raigeki. So like you don't get the maximum amount of advantage. With Detonator, again, in the scenario of something like the Dracotales, you'll go normal summon down a Lucias. They'll try and chain Detonator. You'll go, cool, chain Super Poly, use Lucias plus the Detonator to get you into a Chorozo, and then you're in a good position there because you've been able to search off the Lucias. You could probably force to go Battle Phase to try and return the Murakumo and then force the Murakumo to try and destroy the Chorozo. So you've got a couple of different options there. Against Fiendsmith, again, it's actually really good as they try to build a field, but it's quite like Book of Eclipse. What you're using is you're going to use 2 of their light Fiend monsters, you're going to get yourself a Garura, you're shutting them off access to their Caesar, but more times than not in a variant of Fiendsmith, they're using the Fiendsmith engine as a bait. They're using it to go, I'm going to force to Caesar, so you need to combo it off with another card. As a breaker, with Caesar being a Fiend Water and Desiree being a Fiend Light, again, it gets a little bit more awkward to try and utilize both those monsters on the field, quite like with the Mitsurugi. So it only becomes a bit of a grey area. It can be good in certain scenarios, but it's going to come down more times than not how you can manipulate the situation with your monsters utilizing Super Poly rather than being able to break their field with the other 4 decks that have the green ticks next to them. Blue Eyes, I think it's really good against Blue Eyes because what you can do with that one is not only can you go into a Secturion Dragon, which quite like the Dracotales is a bit of a very powerful floodgate against them. It's also one of the ones that you can disrupt them as they try to build their field. You can break their field with non-target, and it really does cause them a couple of issues. If you want to put up some targeted protection, you can do. They can't respond with it. It's absolutely insane. Moving into Loonlights, again, very straightforward. It's not a good breaker at all. You can't use the Liga Dancers, you can't get rid of them. More times than not, if you want to use them as fusion materials because they're trying to build their field, you can use them as fusion materials, you can make one of your Garuras, but because they have so many different ways to fusion summon, you're not really ending their turn. Yes, you can make it a little bit awkward, but other than that, they're still able to present a field, they're still able to do what they need to do. It's not a game ender. Moving on to another breaker for this format, let's talk about Metaltronis. Now, Metaltronis is a bit of an interesting one because this gets more effective depending on the deck you're playing. Now, if you're playing Yummies and you expect to play loads of Yummies, then this could actually be a really, really good card for you because quite like Ultimate Slayer, quite like Dark Will No More, it's dictated a little bit more by the extra deck, but it trades 1-for-1 with your opponent. Whether you want to be able to get a free material on the field, or whether you just want to banish that opponent's monster face down, which makes it a little bit more awkward. Banish that monster, which makes it a little bit more awkward for them to regain that resource. It can be very, very effective for you. So what I mean by that is you're only trading 1-for-1s. So you're only really being able to trade a Snatchy for a Snatchy, or you're able to trade a Herald of the Art Light for a Herald of the Art Light. You're only doing these 1-for-1 trades. It's still effective, it's not a game ender. The benefit of it being a quick play can be utilized for during both players' turn, but when you're doing a 1-for-1 kind of trade, you probably want to try and maximize your advantage from that. And what I mean by that is, it's more risk and reward to play Book of Eclipse, but Book of Eclipse trades for 2 or more. Whereas with Metaltronis, you're only ever going to trade for 1. The only benefit is it's going to be an extender. It also is then dictated by the deck, as previously mentioned. So if you're playing Yummies, it's really good if you expect to face loads of Yummies. If you're playing a different deck that doesn't utilize the types and attributes of Yummies, it's not going to get you as much advantage as possible. So overall, I think it's a great area. Pretty much across the board, there'll be some scenarios where it's a little bit more effective than most, but when you're looking at specific cards, quite like when you're able to activate Ghost Reaper, you need to tailor your extra deck. So it's more beneficial depending on the deck you're playing and the decks you're going to be facing, but as an overall generic card for any deck that wants to be utilizing it, it's not as great as it could be. The exact same for Canines, kind of jumped ahead a little bit in this one, but Canine, Vanquish Soul, Crystron, Cyber Dragons, you name it, there are just too many targets for you to be able to utilize. Yes, you might have access to get the exact same card from the deck if you're expecting to play a lot of mirror matches. That's when you get the benefit of something like a Metaltronis to be a little bit more effective for you. But remember, Metaltronis targets, so if they do have a Lupas, your Ripper is not going anywhere, or the Ripper's not getting targeted. So it kind of just dictates a little bit more of where you can interact and how you can interact with it. Against the Dracotales, I honestly don't think it's that good. Yes, of course, you could bring out an Arthleon from the deck. You could trade out a Secturion Dragon, but if you're trading off a Secturion Dragon or an Arthleon, you're already playing those cards. And it means you're probably utilizing it in the mirror match. And in the mirror match, you're better off using a card like Super Poly than you are utilizing a Metaltronis. So personally, I just wouldn't bother using it. The exact same thing can really be said about Malice. Again, you can trade these 1-for-1s. It does get rid of their cards. It kind of stops them going where it needs to go. The big thing about the Malice matchup is you're actually able to utilize it more in your favor to be able to get you access to a Heart's Crypta, which gives you this Link monster for pretty much free, and you get some free fodder to utilize and play off the back of it. Again, it's a bit of a trade back and forth. It's a bit of a grey area. It can be good. I honestly don't think it's that great. I feel that the deck that's going to get the most advantage from it would be a Yummy deck if you expect that you're going to be doing well going onto the top tables and all of the matchups you're going to be facing are going to be Yummies. Mitsurugi Raizu, you're just trading with Detonator. That's what people used to use it for as a utility card. You're trading for Detonator. Trading for Detonator isn't a bad thing to do. It's not the end of the world, but again, you need to free up that space in your extra deck to then play the Detonator to then do so. So it's okay. You could trade with a Murakumo, which isn't that bad, but then you're losing your own Murakumo. So give or take. Fiendsmith, again, you're trading for Caesar. It targets Desiree, so Desiree isn't going to be affected. And Memento, you probably could trade with a combined creation, but again, you'll need to dictate your extra deck to make sure that you have a target, or your main deck to make sure you have a target to deal with it. So overall, grey area. Blue Eyes, again, you'll trade back and forth. It can be stopped with a Primite Drill Beam. Yes, you trade with their Spirit Dragon, but again, because they have so many cards that they can chain to the activation of it and then tag out their cards, it's not that effective. I'll probably put it more of a red X than a grey kind of meh or a grey kind of midpoint, but honestly, yeah, not really worth it. Lunar Lights, again, the exact same thing. Once they get to the towers, you can't out it. It's no effect whatsoever. Moving on to Evenly Matched. Now, I actually think Evenly Matched is a really good card. I personally like Evenly Matched as a card in general. I like the artwork. I like the fact that it balances the scenarios. The biggest downside is right now, cards are so powerful as a one-of. Now, what I mean by that is when you're trying to trade with Yummies, if they want to keep their field, they'll use Herald of Art Light. So you're trading your battle phase and an Evenly Matched for a Herald of the Art Light. We've already discussed there are better options to do something like that with. If they don't want to keep their field and they're like, I'll just keep the Herald of the Art Light around, or I'll just keep the Snatchy on the field, you need to combo it off with another card. Now, if you're able to go, cool, Dark Run them more evenly, or if you're able to go evenly and then Harpy's Feather Duster or a Lightning Storm, you're in Dreamland because you're clearing off what they have. More times than not, though, they'll probably keep their strongest monster on the field. So they'll probably keep a Snatchy, or they'll keep a Herald, or they just negate it. It's not, you're trading a battle phase and a card from your hand for one. So it's basically like Dark Rule No More with extra steps because you're giving them another turn guaranteed, and then you're not really getting the best outcome you want for it. The exact same. Now, it's a little bit more effective against the Vanquished Souls because they'll lose so much resource. It will force the trap card. It leaves them with one card on the field that they'll have to keep tagging out back and forth. So they'll go Borga, draw cards. So basically their resource will end up back in their hand. Against the Crystron Canines, again, very, very good against them because Ripper can't really stop it. The only benefit is it will trade out the Infinity. So if you're able to go, cool, Dark Run No More on the entire field, and then an evenly, you will decimate their resource. It's a lot different in comparison to the Yummies, where they can keep one of their cards around. You still need to then back it up with a Dark Run No More. You're trading their Omni Negate. Again, quite like with Infinity, those you're going to be trading your battle phase, and you're going to be trading the card from the hand for the Infinity, when again, we've already established that there are better cards to do something like that with, maybe like a Dark Run No More, which will give you a little bit more utility. But again, if you're able to combo it with a Dark Run No More and an evenly, happy days. So, grey area. For Dracotals, I actually think it's really, really good against Dracotals. The reason I say that is because Dracotals aren't really ending on an Omni Negate. They're not ending on that. They're ending on a trap card that lets you negate a spell card. They're ending on a trap card that lets you return a tap position monster on the field. So if you're able to then go, okay, cool, activate Evenly Matched, the best thing they could do is they'll probably keep like one of the trap cards and then they let all of their fusion monsters on the field get banished face down. The biggest downside of that one is they lose that resource completely. Like the Glamel cannot come back. The Arthleon cannot come back. They might have the ability, if they want to, during the main phase, if you threaten battle phase, they'll go Femena, which is a really good way to bait the Femena out, because they'll use Femena to fuse if they're worried about evenly. And then they'll probably reduce themselves to get a bit more resource, but then the benefit of doing something like that is going to be nothing, because they'll just set loads of cards, and then you just go, okay, cool, well, evenly, you lose it all. So, it's very, very good against the Dracotal lineup. I feel, again, your deck, you need to be comfortable with the deck. So if you were playing like a Canine variant, I think you'd be in a very good position, because you'll know the Femena is going to trigger your Canines. So what you'll do is you'll go, force the battle phase, clear off everything that they leave themselves with. So they'll leave themselves with a trap card. And if you choose not to use a spell card, you just go, cool. Try to force out the Femena. They use the Femena, they fuse, they set some more cards. The cards they're going to be setting are not going to be the trap cards. And then you're going to be going, all right, fine. Then you use Izuna, Lupus, make an XZs, maybe like a Valon, or make a Ripper. Ripper can search. Then you extend your plays over and over and over again. And you've done a very good trade-off at that point. For Malice, I actually think it could be quite good against Malice because, again, what you're trading with them is they'll have like a GWC that they're probably going to chain. They'll then banish out one of their link monsters that can then come back after the evening match is resolved. They'll lose their field spell. They'll let that go and get banished face down. They'll then banish any of the other monsters that are not that effective to have left on the field or they don't want to come back. And the biggest benefit of something like evening match is when it banishes it face down, it's so much harder to get it back into rotation. So I actually think it's quite good. But remember, with the GWC, being able to activate cards that banish their cards as cost, or being able to banish the cards or get them to the graveyard or search them cards or follow them up or anything else like that, they're still going to be able to represent their field to you. For the Mitsurugi and for the Mitsurugi lineup, I don't think it's so bad. But remember, if you're looking at their best end field is going to be Murakumo, Detonator, and Purification, alongside Prez and everything else. So you're either going to go bait out the Purification and then evenly them. And when you do that, they'll probably go, okay, well, I'll either keep the Detonator or I'll keep the Murakumo. If they choose to keep the Detonator anyway, they'll chain the Prez. The Prez will give them a search. They'll tribute off the Murakumo. So then on resolution, quite like with Malice, they'll just rebuild the field. So it's not a game ending point. It's one of the ones where they still get the Detonator. The Detonator is still going to be annoying. That you kind of need to be able to combo these all off. That you'll need to be able to go, okay, cool, evenly, clear everything off, lead them with Detonator, and then Dark Rule no more. So again, it's one of them combo pieces that need two, which is why it goes to a grey area on its own. I still think it's a good option that will catch a lot of people off guard, but it's also one of the ones that, you know, players can navigate around a little bit more effectively than a lot of people give it credit for. For the Fiendsmith variant, I actually think it's quite good against the Fiendsmith variant. Desiree is a bit of an issue, but if you're able to bait out the Desiree or like Dark Rule the Desiree and again, evenly match, they lose their Requiem, they'll lose their Agmonde if they've done that way, they'll lose their Sequence. They probably might choose to keep the Caesar. If they keep the Caesar and then you're able to kind of clear it off in the main phase 2, that can be a bit of a detriment for them. Because they have a good combination of spells, traps, and the monsters on the field, an evening match can be very, very effective against them. That being said, because they're able to just go evening match on their own, they go, cool, I'll keep a Caesar. It's still going to give them a bit of an issue because they'll still have Paradise in the graveyard as well. Like a lot of their effects will come from the graveyard later on, and it'll just be recurred resource that's going to cause you the most issue. So, bit of a grey area. It's good, but you need to combo it off with something else. Against Blue Eyes, again, I've put this down as really good, and the reason I put it down as a green tick is for the pure fact that they don't. I mean, the more and more I think about it, it's probably not that good because what will happen is if you threaten battle phase, it basically allows you to bait out the Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon because you'll go Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon, tag out, and if you go, right, I'll still continue to the battle phase, evenly matched, they'll go Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit, negate the evenly matched, and then you've basically done the same as the rest. You've just traded a battle phase and an evenly matched for a Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon. So it's one of the ones where you need to combo it off. You need to be able to go. We've already mentioned that Dark Rule No More isn't that effective for you because you activate Dark Rule No More, they'll go, cool, chain the trap card, chain this, chain out. So it's one of the ones you need to really stop the Spirit Dragon resolving because that's where their Omni Negate's going to be. And the biggest thing against Blue Eyes is when you're giving them notice that you're going to be doing something like that with a spell or trap, they're then going to tag out. Like, you don't really give them that much notice on a Lightning Storm or a Harpy's Feather Duster because you just go draw phase, standby phase, main phase, you get priority. But when you're trying to go to battle phase with an empty field, there's only one card in the whole game of existence you're probably going to be fearful of, and that's going to be evenly matched. So they're always going to do everything they can to navigate around it. So I put it as a green tick. Honestly, it should probably be like a grey circle. Like, that's kind of what it should go for. Lunar Lights, again, like, they already have their field. Like, you evenly their field, they go, cool, I'll just keep a Liga Dancer. The biggest difference for something like an evening match compared to everything else is it affects the player. So if your opponent has 2 Liga Dancers, they'll have to banish 1 Liga Dancer down, but then they still have a Liga Dancer on the field, and they're like, okay, cool, whatever. Moving on to our third and final section of the Breakers. So, for the Breakers on this one, we've got Kaijus, we've got Dino Pankratops, we've got Kashtira Fenrir, and then the two that are kind of like these grey areas, they're cards that I wanted to talk about. I didn't want to do another section of this all about Floodgate cards, because I feel the Floodgate cards are like one-offs that you're trying to get to, but I also felt that Gravekeeper's Inscription and Necro Valley are just insanely good cards this format. The biggest issue with those particular cards that I'll talk about a little bit more in depth later on is for the pure fact that not many decks can actually play them themselves, because they'll hurt them just as much as it does the opponents. So let's talk about Kaijus. I think Kaijus are actually really quite good against Yummies. Now, in a scenario where you're able to play Lava Golem, that's going to be more beneficial for you because you just go, cool, Lava Golem, Snatchy, and Herald. The Kaiju does give you a lot to think about because, again, you're either going to go, do I care about the Herald? Do I go draw phase Imperm on the Snatchy? Don't need to worry about the Snatchy. Kaiju, the Herald of the Art Light, and off I go. it gives you that one that you're doing a 1-for-1 trade. You're doing a Kaiju for another monster. The biggest downside is you're still giving your opponent a monster. So when you're like, what trade-off can I do with one card? Do I want to go for a Kaiju or do I want to go for a Book of Eclipse? The only benefit where Kaiju comes into play is if the Kaiju actually helps you with your own plays itself. Like, if you can utilize the Kaiju's attribute to get you into some Shadol plays in Dracotales, that'll be more effective for you than a Book of Eclipse. If you're worried that Book of Eclipse is going to get ashed, Kaiju will be more effective for you. But the fact of the matter is, you're only going to be able to trade when your opponent is putting like 1, 2, 3, or even 4 interactions in the monster zones against you, and you're only trading 1-for-1. You need to be extremely confident that you can clear off the rest of those cards. Like, Dark Ruler gets the job done. You don't really need to Kaiju any of your opponent's monsters. I still think it's really, really good against the Yummy strategy because you can go, if you're able to combo this off with something else, you can actually break a field very easily. Being able to get rid of a Herald, get rid of a Statue without your opponent being able to react is really, really important. It also lets you bypass stuff like Judgments and Warnings as well, which is something like Book of Eclipse can't really do. But ultimately, I feel that I would much rather play Super Poly if I have the option to. But then if I don't have the option to it, I think Kaijus are a really good option. In the Canine strategy is a bit of a weird one because you could Kaiju a Vanquish Soul Field. You're probably going to be going for a Ripper. In a pure version, you're going for the Ripper. In a Canine Crystron version, you're probably going to go for an Infinity. And if you go for an Infinity, you're then going to want to follow that up with a Breaker. So, again, it's one of the ones that becomes a 2-card combo, which is why it's a grey area, because they're presenting their field with multiple options. Up against Dracotales, I don't think it's worth it. We've already talked about trying to remove their monsters on the field is not that much worth it. And the biggest downside of it is when they have their monsters on the field, unless you're trying to get rid of a Floodgate monster in the form of like Windar and a form of maybe a Secturian Dragon, you're still giving them their monster. You're still giving them the fusion material that they could use to get into their Dracotale cards or get into any of their other fusion monsters. So you're actually really helping them out. Same could be said about the Malice ones. You're not really getting rid of anything of that much importance. They'll just be able to float it back to the field. And when you're only doing a 1-for-1 and still giving them a monster, you're basically going, I'll trade this monster for that monster, but then you get that monster back. So you're not really getting rid of something that effective. Like, if you're doing one monster for one monster, you want to make sure that you're giving them a weaker monster in return. Whereas if you're just giving them a weaker monster and then they still get that monster you got rid of back, you're not really taking anything away from them. The exact same for the Mitsurugis. If you tribute the Murakumo just comes back anyway. You contribute off the Detonator, that's not a bad thing to do. You do get to clear off the Detonator, but then quite like the rest of them, you're doing a trade for Detonator, but you're still giving them a monster, whereas you're better off not giving them a monster and play something like a Metaltronis, play a Ultimate Slayer or something along those lines. Against Fiendsmiths, again, you'll trade off for the Caesar, you'll trade off for the Desiree, so it does have a bit of benefit being able to non-target remove those particular cards. And this is that prime example of what you're doing is you're trading a weaker monster for a stronger monster. That's when you're going to get the most benefit from it, so it's a general grey area. Yes, it could be considered just as good against the Yummy match, like in the same brackets of the Yummy matchup, but I feel what you need to worry about more so with the Fiendsmith is that they're still going to have Paradise in rotation. Trading with a Caesar is very, very important, but I feel that there are other generic cards that are going to be more effective for you that will be allow you to out those particular scenarios. Unless you combo off with another card, so like Kaiju, Book of Eclipse, that can be really, really useful. Blue Eyes, again, it's kind of okay. Like, you tribute off the Spirit Dragon, it means their Spirit Dragon is not going to be able to go into the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, or you tribute off their Ultimate Dragon, they're not going to be able to go and get you that negate. So if you're able to combo that off with an Evenly Matched or a Dark Ruler or something like that, again, very, very powerful, very, very important, but not going to be that effective for you. Lunalights. We finally have a green tick for Lunalights. This is a bit of a grey area as well, though, because consider if they make 2 Liger Dancers, you need to make sure you are playing another card that can out that second Liger Dancer. Whether that be the Underworld Goddess, whether that be a Lava Golem instead, those are ways that you can out the Liger Dancer. But if your opponent only puts 1 Liger Dancer on the field, you go, cool, Kaiju, get rid of it, you don't need to worry about it, you're not affecting the card, it's very, very effective. Carrying on, we're going to be talking about one of the more considered cards of this particular format, and that is, of course, going to be Dino Wrestler Pankratops. Now, Pankratops has the benefit that it is a 2600 monster that summons itself down without activating an effect to then be able to attack some of the weaker monsters that Yummies are going to be presenting. The biggest downside of something like this is that your opponent will be able to chain one of their Yummy cards. In doing so, what you're trying to do is you're trying to force out the battle phase. So you'll go Special on down Pankratops, go to the battle phase. Pankratops to try to declare an attack on either the Herald of the Arclight or the Snatchy. Snatchy will then be able to chain its effect or activate its effect to then bring back and Synchro Summon. More times than not, they're going to bring back and Synchro Summon into a monster that will attempt to put Dino Wrestler Pankratops face down, so it's not going to be as effective. In that scenario, you will then chain the Dino Wrestler Pankratops, tributing it to the graveyard to then target either the Synchro monster on the field, which will just tag out, the field spell, quite effective, or the Herald of the Arc Light to trade off. More times than not, your opponent's either going to go, cool, Herald of the Arc Light to negate, not that it makes much of a difference, or just let the Pankratops destroy it. The biggest downside of something like that is you've traded your battle phase for a Herald and a Snatchy, which is fine, but then it means once you go to the main phase 2 and you activate another effect, the Synchro monster will continue to tag out. So it still has plays to make. It's not an overall game ender, but it's a very, very good card. And the benefit that it has is that it's not an effect that has to really be activated, and it's 2600. So it's actually quite strong in comparison to Fenrir, which we'll talk about after this. Moving into the K9 Christian Vanquish Soul lineup, it's okay. What I mean by that is, again, you can special summon it down, you're not utilizing an effect. So you can go against the Christian one, you go special summon it down, go to the battle phase. Chances are what's going to happen there is you're probably then going to bait out the cluster. When they activate the cluster, you'll then use the Dino Rest of the Pankratops to tribute it off, to then try and destroy either a Tristanos, the Infinity, or the cluster, so that stuff like that doesn't resolve. And in doing so, they're probably going to go Infinity Negate, or they're going to chain the Tristanos, or they're going to be able to utilize like something else that will allow them to play around it. So it's a good trade-off. It's actually really, really good in that one. You can't target the Ripper, so remember, Ripper's going to be protected. That's not going to do anything for you. But it's a little bit stronger than Ripper, so you could just threaten to attack the Ripper, and then it's like, right, well, you'll put the onus on your opponent that they need to do something to stop the attack if they want their monster to survive. If they don't want their monster to survive and you kill it, you can then just go, cool, Pankratops effect, and then what you're doing is you're trading your Pankratops 2 for 1, because you'll be using Pankratops to destroy a monster by battle, and then using its effect to either bait out a negate or kill that monster, destroy that card. Really, really good. I like Pankratops in the Yummy matchup, in the K9 matchup. I still think it's a very, very good option. It's one that I would prioritize maybe above Fenrir right now, just because it requires your opponent to have more monsters than you, rather than you have no monsters. And when you're playing decks like the K9s or the Feymaners, the Dracotals, where you're putting monsters on your field turn 0, it makes the Fenrir a little less consistent. And with Pankratops being a little bit stronger, it does give you a bit more control over everything. But quite like Evenly Match, you're trading your battle phase for this, basically, this scenario. Moving into the Dracotals. Now, Dracotals, again, is a bit of a grey area on this one. And what I mean by that is, more times than not, you'll be able to special summon down Pankratops. It can threaten some of the little monsters, but more times than not, the fusion monsters are going to be a lot stronger than Pankratops, so Pankratops can't just attack them or threaten the battle phase. If you utilize Pankratops as a effect, the biggest benefit of something like that is it will allow you to bait out one of the spell and traps, because you'll be able to utilize Pankratops, chain it out to target one of the spells and traps that's going to be the most effective against you and what you're trying to play, and then they can't chain those trap cards. They're going to be the best options to target, because if you target one of the monsters, they'll just go, okay, cool, fine, let you destroy the monster, or they'll use Feymane and use it as fusion material. So overall, bit of a grey area. Being able to out the trap cards, massively amazing. Being able to try and deal with the monsters, not so great. Malice is an interesting one, because it can be stronger than some Malice monsters. It's really going to come down to what the Malice Link monsters point to as to whether or not they get attack stat buffs, whether they can't be destroyed by battle, whether they can't be destroyed by card effect. If they are just generally quite weaker, like a White Binder on its own, you just go, cool, Pankratops, attack it, kill it, and then in main phase 2 or still in the battle phase, use Pankratops, tribute off to destroy another card on the field. Which is a good trade-off. A 2 for 1 trade-off is always going to be quite good, but it's more of a grey area. It's not one of the ones you put Pankratops down and that's it, straight away you can out a True Light that's going to clear their entire field off. It's one of the ones that cause them quite a few issues. In the Mitsurugi and Raizel matchup, it's not bad. The issue is, again, quite like Dracotals, you can't threaten Detonator or Mirakumo in battle. So they'll just sit there and be like, okay, what are you going to do? And all you're really going to get the advantage for the Pankratops is you've got the ability to go quick effect Pankratops to trade with the Detonator. So you'd summon down the Pankratops, you'd use Pankratops effect to try and trade with the Detonator, and they'll just go, okay, cool, protect so it can't be destroyed by card effect. So you're not really gaining huge amounts of advantage from it. You're kind of like not benefiting at all. So overall, not really worth it. I wouldn't be putting in that particular matchup. Up against the Fiends with Variant, again, you're trading for Caesar. You're not strong enough to destroy the Caesar, but you're not summoning yourself via a card effect, so you can actually just go activate Pankratops, tag it out, try to destroy the Caesar. Very, very good on that one. It does target, so it can't out the Detonator. It is one of the ones that if your opponent has another monster that can be destroyed by battle that is weaker than the Caesar, you can go battle phase, Pankratops, kill it, and then tribute off the Pankratops, deal with the Caesar, and then main phase 2, off you go, activate your Rahu, Dragon Tail, and everything else in between. So I actually think it's pretty good, but it's more of a grey area because it just can't beat the Caesar by battle. It doesn't threaten the battle phase. Against Blue Eyes, I think this has like the best option for Blue Eyes, and the reason I say that is because it's kind of like a monster that is also a spell and trap. Spell and trap removal. What I mean by that is you can summon down the Pankratops, You can't really threaten any of the big Blue Eyes monsters by battle, but what you can do is you can threaten any of the little ones, all quite like trying to trade with the Caesar, is you go summon down Pankratops, Pankratops effect, tribute it off, to then try and destroy the True Light. They train the True Light to get them resources back, the True Light gets destroyed, the True Light goes to the graveyard, and then clears off their monsters. So I just think it's really kind of good in that scenario. Lunar Lights, no effect. Like, they're unaffected, they don't care. You're not going to use this as a breaker. Moving into Fenrir, I think Fenrir kind of has those moments where sometimes it can be better than Pankratops, sometimes it can be worse than Pankratops. I've already mentioned that it's a little bit weaker than Pankratops, so it doesn't threaten some of the monsters on the field as much. I've also mentioned that it requires you to have no monsters on the field, which again, depending on the deck you're playing, it might not be as effective. The biggest benefit of something like the Fenrir is the Fenrir will be able to banish cards face down. So it's a lot harder for your opponent to get them back into rotation, and it doesn't destroy them by card effects. So again, it's a little bit harder for your opponent to get them back into rotation. The biggest downside with that one is where Pankratops contribute itself as cost, so it plays around some sort of targeted effects. With Fenrir, because it has to chain on the next available chain option, it means your opponent can play around it, your opponent can be a little bit more cautious for it, and it means your opponent can forcefully negate it or stop it in a bit more scenario. So if we're going to be utilizing the example of going to the battle phase in Yummies, you'll go, cool, special down Fenrir, attempt to go battle phase. Now, you could use Fenrir's effect to search, and what that will happen is if your opponent does clear the Fenrir off, you still just summon down another Fenrir. But more times than not, what's going to happen is you're going to go battle phase, go into the battle phase, Snatchy uses its effect to summon out the Synchro monster. On a new chain, you'll then be able to go, cool, Fenrir target the field spell, chain the Synchro monster to tag out, or chain Herald to negate, and you're kind of back in this same position. You've not really done anything, you've just baited out a couple of interactions at the cost of your battle phase. So overall, it's good. It's a grey area. I wouldn't be playing Pankratops and Fenrir. I'd probably be playing one or the other. And right now, I'd probably be leaning a little bit more towards the Pankratops than I would the Fenrir. A little bit different in the K9 matchup, and the reason I say that is when they activate Azuna in hand, you're like, yeah, okay, cool, come down. Azuna comes down, you go, perfectly fine. Utilize the effect of Fenrir to banish the Azuna so they can't get a rank 5, or you let them bring the Lupus back from the graveyard. In doing so, the only downside for something like that is they can go, okay, so Lupus affecting the graveyard, come back to the field, you go chain Fenrir, they'll just go chain Lupus. If they activate Lupus effect, you can't chain on top of that, so that's where it can kind of play around it. The big difference with Fenrir to Pankratops is Fenrir can actually be very, very good for you going first, because you summon down the Fenrir, and in certain scenarios, if you don't run into Droll, you can use Fenrir's effect to search, gives you some resource. It also then just checks some of your opponent's activated effects. So it outs the Azuna, which is absolutely amazing. If you summon from the edge of deck twice, you're probably going to face down a Typhon. Again, it's a bit of a grey area against them. Up against the Dracotals, this is a little bit different again to the Pankratops, because what the Fenrir will do is rather than destroying them and putting the cards in the graveyard where your opponent doesn't mind having them, Fenrir can only target face-up cards. So where it can't out the spells and traps, and Pankratops is a little bit better in that scenario, it can threaten to banish one of the monsters face down, which will then force out the Feymana. It can also chain to the Feymana, so they'll go what I mean by chain by the Feymana is you'll go activate Feymana, you go, yep, cool, resolved. They'll go chaining 1 Artheon, chaining 2 Lucias, chaining 2 whatever other card they've used. Chaining 3 can then be your Fenrir, target the Artheon to banish it face down. So there's ways of spot removing it. It can be a good check card. I feel that Pankratops is still better to be able to bait out those spells and traps. So still a grey area. Moving into Malice, again, a little bit better than Pankratops because it banishes them face down, so you're not putting their resources in the graveyard. Again, the difference is that you have to go to the battle phase, you have to be stronger than some of the Malice monsters, then you banish the field spell face down, you banish any of the Malice monsters face down, it's a lot harder for them to get back in rotation, so overall, pretty decent. Up against the Mitsurugi Raizio strategy, if you're able to chain to the Murakumo, which very rarely is going to happen because they'll bring back the Murakumo, they'll go chaining 1 Murakumo to Raigeki. The only time you're able to chain to it is if the previous chain they've activated a monster effect. So if they went like Murakumo, chaining 1, chaining 1, tribute off, chaining 2, something else, like a monster effect, and then they resolve everything, the Murakumo comes back to the field, Murakumo's effect to Raigeki, that's when you can use your Fenrir to target the Murakumo and banish it face down. You can also target the Detonator to banish it face down, and again, if they're trading their Detonator with the Fenrir, if you've used your search for the second Fenrir, you just go, okay, cool, special them down another Fenrir. So it's better than Pankratops in that scenario because it can also threaten the Murakumo and the Detonator in the battle phase. Because it goes to the battle phase, it could use its effect to target one of those strongest monsters and banish it face down, or it can target something else. So it can be quite useful as long as the card is face up, that's when you're going to get the best benefit from it. Into the Fiends matchup, again, banishing their cards face down can be very, very helpful because you banish an Engraver face down, it's not in the graveyard, they can't loop its resource. You banish a Lacrima face down, again, they can't loop that back around to use their Foolish Burial. It can't out a Caesar in the sense that it's not strong enough to out it, but it just goes to the battle phase, activate Fenrir, declare an attack, Fenrir, target Caesar, banish it face down. Great, their resources still go to the graveyard, but it does the exact same job as Pankratops, so very nice, great option. Against Blue Eyes, a little less effective than Blue Eyes, and what I mean by that is, yes, you can banish the True Light face down, which means they can't get it back into rotation, which is quite useful. It can also let you target monsters and banish them face down as well, but ultimately, the benefit of Pankratops over Fenrir in this scenario is that Pankratops lets you deal with the True Light, destroying the True Light, and then ultimately giving you a Raigeki, whereas Fenrir doesn't give you that capabilities, which is why, in my opinion, it's a little bit less so than the Pankratops. Against Lunar Lights, again, I've put a red X on this one because as a breaker, it's not that great, but going first, it can actually be quite useful for you because if your opponent activates a card or effect, or monster effect, sorry, you can target like one of their scales and banish it face down, and when they're wanting to utilize cards to loop them back, like a Kaleido Chick, you banish that card face down. It makes it a lot awkward for them to try and loop those cards back round into rotation, so it's actually a little bit better than Pankratops in that scenario, but as a breaker, you're not going to be utilizing it. So moving on to the last two cards. So the last two cards are Gravekeeper's Inscription and Necro Valley. So the reason I think these two cards are going to be really good in this format is the fact of the matter is it shuts off all of these decks up on this list right here. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with Gravekeeper's Inscription, what it does is at the start of main phase 1, which is a bit of a downside because it has to be the first card you activate, you apply one of the following effects until the end of your opponent's turn, so it gives you a little bit more variation. Neither player can activate card effects in the graveyard, so that's a very, very good way to shut off Lupus. It's a very, very good way to shut off any of the Drakatown monsters that want to set their cards. Neither player can banish cards from the graveyard, so that can shut down Malice monsters if they're trying to banish from the graveyard. Not as effective because they do have ways to banish from the field and everything else in between. It also means that you can utilize different cards because you can't banish from the graveyard stuff like Bestials and anything else that you want to do. So neither player can banish cards from the graveyard, being stuff like Paradise as well can't be banished. It also means your opponent can't get into Tyrant Dragon because they can't banish the Roar of the Blue Eyes Dragon to Fusion. The Wishes to Equipped and then go from there. The last event is neither player can special summon monsters from the graveyard. Now this is obviously going to be very, very good against the Yummies because it means they can't use Snatchy, they can't use their Synchros, and it makes it very, very awkward for them. It also means that Lupus can't come back from the graveyard. That makes it very awkward for the K9s. It means Tristanos can't be banished from the graveyard as well. They can't use Cluster, everything else like that. So there are ways where it can be very, very effective in these particular scenarios, and I'm going to talk you through them now on. So with Yummy, the benefit you get is if you stop your opponent being able to summon from the graveyard. The biggest downside is if you activate this during your main phase 1, it's till the end of the next turn. So it will cover your entire turn, then it covers their turn, and then when it comes back to your turn, they can start using Snatchy again, they can start using the Synchro monsters again and everything else in between. So unless you open up another Gravekeeper's Inscription and you go activate Gravekeeper's Inscription, they then chain to it, that's when you're still going to be able to get as much advantage as possible. So it's kind of a grey area just because they can play during your turn just as much, but you can really stump them for an entire turn. So it's okay in the Vanquish Soul lineup for the pure fact that it stops your opponent special summoning cards from the graveyard. So just for the Canines in general, it stops the Lupus going on. It's going to be more effective in the Crystron version because it stops them being able to banish cards from the graveyard. So it means like your Schmeiger can't be banished, Cluster can't be banished, Tristanos can't be banished. It also stops them special summoning monsters from the graveyard. So the Sulfenir and Sulfador can make it very, very awkward for them. So it kind of gives you a lot to utilize on that one. I think it's actually really, really good. The one big thing about this card in general, as I mentioned already, is a deck that can actually play this card and not be affected by the effect you want to choose. Moving into the Drakatals, I think it's really, really good against the Drakatals. You just say that your opponent cannot activate card effects in the graveyard. Straight away, that will shut off the ability of utilizing any of their fusion materials to reset cards or set cards from the deck. So when you're able to go, cool, your fusion material just can't set cards from the deck, you're basically saying to them, here's a Retaliating Sea without Retaliating Sea. Again, downside needs to be activated during main phase 1. It affects you and your opponent. It means that they will have to utilize the Feymana during your turn and obviously use Feymana in the next turn as well. Malice is kind of okay. Stopping cards being banished from the graveyard is going to be more effective against the Bestial lineup. There are ways that they can dictate without needing to banish cards from the graveyard and without needing to special from the graveyard. So there's not an end-all be-all, but it's kind of an okay option. Against the Mitsurugi Raizuls, it can actually be really, really good because it will shut down the Murakumo. It means that they have to get the Murakumo to the graveyard, again, quite like Yummies. They need to get the Murakumo to the graveyard. They then need to be able to leave it in the graveyard for their entire turn. They can't proceed to go with the OTK, and then they bring it back during your turn. It does mean that they can't move cards from the graveyard as well. They can't revive cards from the graveyard with some of the Raizul plays that they want to try and make. So it's kind of okay. this is where Necro Valley is going to be a little bit more effective, and I'll talk about that appliance a little bit later on. So it can be good just to stop that Murakumo, especially if you're going second, because then you go, cool, activate Gravekeeper's Inscription, and then that means the Murakumo is never coming back to the field to then Raigeki your field. Against a defensive matchup, I think it's absolutely insane. Neither player can special summon monsters from the graveyard. Great. It means Engraver's never coming back, and it means Lurie's never coming back. So you're in a very, very good position that it's unlike Lupus and some of the Yummy cards that want to come back during your turn. The Engraver can't come back during your turn, or very rarely can it come back during your turn. It also means that they can't go into Caesar. It really stumps their ability to get into Caesar. It stumps their ability to get into Desiree because they can't move, summon cards back from the graveyard. I think it makes it very, very good against the Fiend Swift matchup. Mementos, it can also be very awkward if you say you can't banish cards from the graveyard, you can't summon cards from the graveyard. It can really, really stump them. I think it'd be really, really good against Blue Eyes as well, for the pure fact that against Blue Eyes, it means they can't True Light, it means they can't Maiden. Banishing cards from the graveyard, we've already mentioned, like trying to shut off the access through Wishes into their fusion monster can make it very awkward as well if they're trying to be an aggressive push. So it can kind of stump your opponent and give you another turn. But again, it's finding a deck that can be utilized in your benefit. Loonlight's going second, nothing. Doesn't do anything, they just go Liga Dancer, you have to out that. But going first, if you're able to activate this, the fact that they want to use stuff like Silver Hound, the fact that they want to be able to move cards back from the graveyard, back to the field with stuff like Yellow Martin, with stuff like Kaleido Chick as well. Even Polymerization sometimes will come down to Necro Valley a little bit more later on. Being able to banish cards from the graveyard, it means the Lunalight Wolf is going to need to use the field and the hand, which is going to be a lot harder for them to do when they're trying to put the Leo Dancer into the graveyard. They need to move it from the graveyard in order to get into the Liga Dancer, and when you're saying no, that can't happen, it can make it very, very awkward. Necro Valley, I'm going to be very, very quick on this one. Necro Valley is better than Gravekeeper's Inscription all round for the pure fact that Necro Valley just says no cards can be moved in the graveyard, which means you can't add them back to the hand. It means you can't banish them. It means you can't put them back to the deck. It's just an overall no. So it means, and it's not like until the end of the next turn. It's permanently while that card's on the field. So it means Yummies can't synchro at all. Like they can't get their they can't summon their monsters back with their synchro monsters. They can't use Snatchy to summon back. They can't use anything like that. It's a complete shutdown. Lupus, Tristanos, Smygar, Cluster, you name it, complete shut off. You can't move cards from the graveyard, so it means that the trap cards are both shut offline. They can't utilize their trap cards. They need to move cards from the graveyard. It means they can't use Arfleon to regain their resource. It also means that they can't utilize the Urgula to put itself back to the deck and then add a Femana back to the graveyard, so it really does burn their resource off. It can be very, very good against Malice because no card can move in the graveyard, which means they can't banish it through any form of extension. They can't use March Hare. They can't loop cards back from their graveyard if they're under Draw and Lockbird. It's probably more of a grey circle than a green tick, and I probably got carried away a little bit on this one, but it means that they can't use White Binder to banish from the graveyards. They can't use Access Code Talker, which is really, really important as well because it means they can't push their aggression out. It does make it very, very awkward. Murakumo can't go anywhere. Murakumo cannot come back, full stop. Unlike the Gravekeeper's Inscription, which lets them Murakumo during your turn, it means they can't Murakumo at all. It means they can't utilize their Ryzeal cards from the graveyard. They would then need to utilize Detonator to pop the Necro Valley, and if you're able to stop them getting to Detonator with the Necro Valley, it's just an insanely powerful floodgate. We've already talked about how good it is to stopping cards moving in the graveyard. It means that they can't Engraver, they can't Paradise now, they can't Paradise, Lorry, they can't Tract to fuse, they can't Sequence to fuse, like it's complete shutdown. Again, same with Blue Eyes, they can't Maiden, they can't attempt to fuse, they can't True Light. It really does cause them huge amounts of issues. They can't even Blue Eyes Link 1 and tag that out. And then the exact same thing with Loonlights. You're not going to be putting in this card going second. Like it's going to be a card you put in going first, and then even then you need to see it, so you're going to tailor your deck to see it in order to be a consistent floodgate. Against Loonlights going first, they don't play. They just don't play. They're like, they have to out it because they want to be utilizing so much. I've already mentioned they want to loop back Kaleido Chick. They want to banish from their graveyard to make their fusion summons a lot easier. They want to be able to use Tiger to bring back from the graveyard. They want to use Yellow Martin to bring back from the graveyard. And you're basically saying, no, you can't do any of that. The biggest issue with those particular cards, which is why they have so many green ticks, is finding a deck that you can competitively and consistently play that gets the best out of Necro Valley. Now, I'm not talking about like a rogue deck that maybe one player plays or like a stun deck, again, that will cause some issues here and there, but you also need to be able to have additional win cons. You can't have Necro Valley be your only win con, but you need to be able to utilize Necro Valley to its best potential and then still get the most of it. So what I mean by that is, if any of these decks up here could play Necro Valley and it not negatively affect them, you'd almost guarantee that card to be a staple in the side deck or the main deck. Unfortunately, because all of these decks can't play that particular card, it makes it very, very awkward. So again, even though it was breakers and I thought this would be a lot quicker than the hand trap lineup, this actually took just as long. Now, hopefully this has given you enough time to be listening to this, whether you're on your way down to the UK Open this weekend and you're listening to this on the train or watching this on the train, whether you are listening to this the night before, whether you are listening to it after the UK Open and you're just curious of what the environment kind of looks like, I hope I've given you as much in-depth detail to give you a breakdown of how these cards are effective against the current Justice Hunters decks right now, which I would highly expect to still be around post a Forbidden Limited list, and then other decks as well in that kind of stratosphere that might change, but even then they're starting to slowly be phased out, and all that's going to happen is those people that are on the Mitsurugi Raizals and Malices, if they do get hit heavily, they're just going to shift to the Justice Hunters decks, and I've pretty much given you the information you need for those as well. So as an overall captivative kind of like summary, these are all the ticks and mares and X's on these particular 5. These are the ticks, mares and X's on this particular 5, and then this is the ticks, mares and X's on the first lot of 5. If you want my explanations on all of them, you'll have to watch the video to give you as much detail as possible. If you just want to see what I've given as an overall branch, then by all means, these are the 3 slides at the end of the video so you can have a bit of an information. But please don't come to me and go, oh my god, I can't believe you put Raigeki as a red X against Mitsurugi Raizal when you haven't listened to the explanations behind it and my justifications behind it, because it's all going to come down to environment, the deck you're playing and everything else. I've just tried to give you a bit of a broad understanding of where I think these particular cards interact, where they get the most from their particular usages and everything else in between. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, as absolutely always, stay safe and of course, happy dueling.